Good morning and welcome to part 8 of building the DJH 2MT kit, and in the last program I finished off all the separate parts for the tender, and what I did over the weekend is, well, I assembled them all, I painted them, I assembled them, and that is the completed tender. Less the buffers and the couplings. We've got, if you remember, it's got pickups, so this is the connection for the locomotive, and well, that's about it. And it runs very nicely because it's quite chunky with that added weight. There are a few little bits and pieces that need tidying up on it. There's quite a noticeable gap between the tank body and the bunker side along here. There's a little bit of a gap where I didn't fill it in with solder, but that's not beyond being remedied. So I shall put that away goes in my sock drawer, because I haven't got a box for it yet. So that's in my sock drawer, and that go away. Now, a question has been asked about how I go about cleaning up the models and everything that I make before painting and, well, assembling, really. And all I can say is that after every program, I take the model into the bathroom, which is just outside, and I clean the model up before I put it away. It gets put away in various places, but usually wrapped up and kept dust free. And what I use to clean, well, it's a multi-stage process really. We'll start off at the beginning. So what I do is, if I've got any large deposits of solder that need removing, I use a stainless steel brush in a Dremel. And you can get these in various sort of shapes. You can get them like that, a wheel, you can get a cup, and you can get a very, very short brush. I use these. A lot of people don't like using them because they do have a tendency to rough up the metal if you don't use them carefully. Don't use the mild steel ones if you are going to use it. Those are the ones with the chrome coloured shaft. You always use the ones with the copper coloured shaft. The mild steel ones only last about 5 minutes, and they're a waste of time, really. Always use the ones which have got stainless steel brushes if you are going to use this. So I use this. I use fiberglass pencil to clean up. I also use my wife's discarded nail files. However, I have found on Amazon packets of various grade nail, well, they're modelling files, and they come in various grades. So the coarsest one, which is that one, that's an 80 grade, and at the other end of the packet this one, conveniently a different colour, is 7000 grade. So they're really designed for plastic models, and I've used, this one is a 180, and I've been using this to do the cleaning up on the next bits of the kit, which I'll show you in a moment, and it's been very effective. Yeah, it does wear out with metal, but I think this packet was about £6, and there's 30 pieces in it, so it's not overly expensive. The other thing that I've found for modelling are these, and these are, there's 120 pieces in this packet, and they're colour coded. And there's the black, they're the 80 grade ones, and they're basically strips. And again, these are designed for plastic models, modelling plastic models, but again, they are very useful for metal kits. Or okay, they will wear out quicker, but again, I think this packet was about a tenner, and there are 120 pieces in, so that's pretty good. And they're all colour coded so that you know which one's which. Taking the bathroom, I also use, oh yes, sorry, forgot to mention, I also use needle files as well, but these are the diamond coated ones rather than the normal cross ones. They don't clog up with white metal, so they're much more efficient if you need to remove a larger amount, which the other pieces, the nail files, won't do. And then of course a very, very sharp scalpel for removing other bits of flash. Now when I take the kit parts into the bathroom, they get washed under warm water, and what I use is I use this Cif bathroom cleaner. It's acidic, and I know that some people have tried using Viacal, but I've tried various things. Viacal, I've tried the Cif kitchen cleaner, I've tried Ajax, I've tried all sorts of stuff over the years, and I've found that this is probably the best. Well, certainly in my opinion, this is the best thing. It doesn't leave a residue. It washes off easily, and because it's acidic, it does take away a lot of residue, and it does shine up, especially nickel silver parts if you're building a nickel silver kit. I can show you something as an example. Right, I'm building for my son. I'm building my son a coal tank, and this has been cleaned in the Cif bathroom cleaner, and it is very shiny. There's no tarnish on the parts. Needs a bit more cleaning up actually, but I've been concentrating on doing this, the 2MT. And then it's also very useful to keep an old toothbrush. So when the part gets sprayed, it gets left for a couple of minutes on it, and then it gets washed off with this and warm water. And if it's a large assembly, I have two, well, they're actually etching trays for PCBs, but they match in size, and I put the large piece inside and then put the cover on top of it, so it's the two parts back to back, a couple of elastic bands around them, and then into the airing cupboard for 24 hours. That dries everything out nicely, so that when you paint, you have actually got a warm, dry surface for the paint to go on, and it works for me. That's what I do, and I have a reasonably decent finish every time, even using Halford's paints, which the tender was painted with a mixture of grey and white primer white primer for the chassis because red goes onto white better than it goes onto grey. And the body and the side pieces were painted with grey primer. And then airbrushed the red is Tamiya matte red, and the rest of it is just Halford's black. So that's how I go out cleaning up, and you can send me some messages if you want to ask me any more questions about how I do things. I mean, I'm by no means a professional modeler, as I say, but I do find that I get acceptable results at the end. And well, it may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it works for me. And that's generally what you need to do. You need to find out by experimentation what works for you. So without any further ado, we will move on to, sorry, I just repositioned myself. We'll move on to doing the locomotive part of the kit, and what we will do is, it's going to be a bit of a strange one, this one, because the kit, you need the combination of the body and the chassis to actually get that, make sure that everything works and everything fits together. So what we'll be doing, we'll be jumping around between various other pages. We've completed page 1 of the instructions, and now we've got pages 2 to 7 to do. So that's page 2, which covers the body. And to be honest, the body of this locomotive, it screws together to some extent. There are parts that need to be soldered on, but largely speaking, it screws together. So what you have is you have the front part of the footplate is all cast as one part, and that I've cleaned this up to a certain extent. There's a little bit of flash, it's not too bad. This side there was quite a bit of flash here, so that's all been cleaned off, and I'm not overly worried about it being scratched because it will be covered up. The footplate with the bit, I've not removed the bit in the middle. This is the drag beam front. It's already folded up for you. Just check that it is square and everything before you start putting stuff on it. And basically it goes on like that, and that's the footplate of the locomotive made. It screws together with one nut and one bolt, which is this middle hole here. We'll do that in a minute. The other thing that you will have in the kit is you will have the Firebox, which is a very, very nice casting, and well, this one needed absolutely minimal cleaning up, but this rear face, if you notice this bit here, that's got to be drilled out 1.6 millimeters and tapped M2, because that screws to the cab. There's a screw that goes through the back of the cab, which is covered up by the boiler back head, and that holds the Firebox to the cab. And then this surface here, these surfaces here, where it rests on the footplate, they need gentle dressing up to remove any imperfections and flash. The other thing that I did is I ran a blade round the inside of this mating part, and that's where the boiler goes. So the boiler is again cast as one piece. Now I don't know if you can see, but what I've done is I've pre-done this bit. There was a casting mark, which is probably a bit more prominent on the bottom. You can see there's a casting mark. Now I'm not going to bother with the bottom because it's underneath the locomotive. All I've done is just remove the worst excesses of it, and it's not going to be seen once the locomotive is finished. But the top, yes, it is going to be seen. So I've done the back bit, and I started off with scalpel, run the scalpel down gently down the casting mark, and well, just gently down, and then I've used various grades of these and my wife's ex nail files. So this bit is done, this bit is partially done, and this bit I've only just run the knife down it, and you can feel it. There is a casting mark, but if you do it gently and everything, you'll end up with a nice finish. It's not a means to actually discard it, but you want to be careful because there is various cast detail on the boiler that you don't want to remove. So like with the smoke box, there are cast rivets, 2 layers of cast rivets. And another thing that I've done, again, I've run the scalpel around the inside of this bit, which mates with the firebox, and also I've rubbed it like that to remove any flash. And what you want, you should do this all before you start assembly. What you want is you don't want any movement between the firebox and the boiler. You don't want it to rotate in that direction. So it is rotating a little bit. So we'll do a little bit more as we're going along. And then the other part that you're going to need for now is the cab, which is a humongous large etched part which has got multiple folds in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, well, there's about 10 folds in that, and we'll fold that up as well because we need to get all of this lined up before we can start putting all the detail parts on. The other thing that we're not going to do is we're not going to put the smoke box front on because this will be fitted with DCC sound, and the most ideal place for obvious reasons to put the speaker and everything is in the boiler, and there's not an awful lot of room to play with because it's quite a small boiler. So I'll reposition the camera, fire the soldering iron up and get the hold and fold out, and we'll start building the locomotive. Okay, body. So welcome back, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to drill out the hole in the firebox for the M2 tap, and it's marked on the instructions that you drill it 1.6 millimeters. I've checked online, and actually it's the hole for tapping M2 is 1.57 millimeters, as though you can get a drill like that readily made. So 1.6 is good enough, and we'll drill it 1.6, and as we're drilling into white metal, slowest possible speed, and we put a drop of oil on it. And there we have that's the hole for that, and we'll tap that in a minute, and we'll leave it, put that to one side. Now going back to our boiler, the boiler didn't quite sit level, so we'll just offer that up. There is a cast line. There's a cast line on the top of the firebox and the top of the boiler which helps you line it up. So that's much better than it was. So we'll put that to one side again. I won't, I will a little bit. So if you remember from the introduction, this bit's been done. I've removed the casting mark. And what we're going to do, I've got an 80 grit. And we'll just rub that. Try not to rub on the boiler bands because you'll rub the boiler band away. So I've used a thicker one and I'll use a finer one now. And there's a little bit next to the boiler band that we can't remove, so we'll just it's just a question of keep on going until you've got something that you find acceptable. And that's, to me, that's pretty acceptable. Where's the autofocus is over there. Let's focus on my shoulder. Right, so it's not bad. It's not bad, and I'll do the smoke box later. So we've got our foot plate, and we'll remove the bits out the middle now. I've left them into the last moment so that it doesn't get distorted. So okay, so that's done. And underneath here there are some rivets, so what I'll do is I'll drill those out 0.85 and we'll put cosmetic rivets in. I'll do that in a minute. Now what you need to do when you look at your foot plate, you've got to decide what period locomotive you're going to build. Now I'm building one that was that's only a couple of months old, but if you build one a bit later you might want to fit the AWS. So there are some half etched holes on the underside. This one on this side, the large one, that's for the battery box. And there are a couple on this side which are for the timing cylinders for the brakes. And obviously if you want to fit one with AWS, you need to open those holes out. So we'll just remove that etching mark. It's a bit coarse. So there's the footplate already folded up. Don't lose this part. This is the, as I said, this is the buffer beam, sorry, the drag beam overlay. So we'll put that to one side, and then we will look at the cab. So a little bit of work with the cab. So what you need to, what I'm going to do, you don't need to do this, but I'm going to score down some of the etch marks, because on this particular type of locomotive, it's some of the demarcation between the things are quite prominent, and one of the prominent things is the cab side sheets lean in quite a bit. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do this one. So we get a nice fold, and we're going to do this one. And this one. That one. Right, we're going to leave the other ones because they're not overly important. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to remove this middle bit. So we'll remove the middle bit. We use just go back in the box. That's a bit of scrap. So there's our cab, and we will get out the hold and fold, and we'll fold this up. Okay, so I've got the hold and fold out. I've had a little bit of a think about how I'm going to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bend the cab sides. So don't bend them too far. So I've just bent them up a little bit. They've got to follow the side of the shape of this side. So we'll take these out. Yeah, maybe it's not as easy as I thought on this particular one. Right, so Yeah, this is quite tricky. It's quite tricky because when you bend this, you're going to bend up the other bits. Maybe I should use a smaller one. I know what I'll do. I won't use the smaller one. I'll use a ruler instead. So carefully. I would definitely go back to the hold and fold for this one. Yeah, it's a very complex shape to bend. So we've got the false plate supports. And there's the cab. So I've tried it up with the foot plate. This part, there's a tab on this, and that goes into the slot in the. It goes into the slot in the drag beam, like that. So what I'll do now is I'll strengthen the cab with a little bit of soldering. Well, I won't exactly strengthen the cab with a little bit of soldering yet. What we need to do is the top of the side sheets need bending over a little bit, and to do that they'll need annealing. So we'll get the gas torch out. Hopefully I've got some gas left. I won't pick it up yet. It'll be a bit warm. All right, we'll quench it with a bit of this. Okay. Right. Right. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use the stainless steel brush to remove the tarnish on the inside, and what we're going to do, we're going to so put your work on it. You need a flat surface to do this, to make sure that it mates up. And the cab side sheets go outside the spectacle plate, so we'll do those first. And that should give it a little bit more strength. Okay, so I've run a bit of solder inside, and I've made sure that there's no significant overhang at the front. And the other thing that I've done is I've tack soldered underneath. Now, what you need to do is you need to make sure that the floor is parallel to that line, the etch line. And probably the easiest way of doing that is to use a steel ruler. So you've got your steel ruler and you offer it up, and provided you haven't got a lot of solder for your cab, then you can see the end in there is square to the cab front and it's square to the floor, so that's level. And what we will do is we'll solder that bit up while we've got the ruler in holding it in place. The other thing you need to do is make sure that the drag beam is vertical. This is quite a lot of work just doing this one etch part, but as long as you do this correctly, it will look, everything else will go correctly because you build from the back forwards. Looks okay. So I've soldered from underneath because you want to try and avoid getting solder. There's etched detail on the foot plate, the wooden foot plate. You want to keep your solder out of that. So we'll just check that this is okay. Yeah, that's fine. So we'll do the other side as well using the same method, except there's a little bit of solder in there that you can see past my sausages, that's nice and square, so we'll do that the same way that we did the other one. Let's check the drag beams square. That's done underneath. And I've just lost my brush. And a little bit of strengthening solder on the inside. So, and then the last thing that we need to do, oh, that's not square. So we'll just adjust that by hand. The last thing that we need to do now that we've done that is these two pieces on the edge. They just need folding inwards. So we'll fold those inwards. And we've got a little bit of a problem. But right, a little bit of a problem that we've got is we've got a gap on this side and we haven't on this side, which means that this side is slightly too low. So we'll fix that before we go any further. I'll do it off camera. So all it is just going to be some repositioning of the foot plate. So I'll do that off camera and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've sorted the sorted the cab out. It was just a question of soldering it and measuring it up using the 6-inch rule, so it was square and that it was even on either side. So that looks okay now. Just check they don't rock. That's all right. So what we'll do is we'll fit the cab to the foot plate, and if you remember, it's the tab goes in that hole, and then it just fits together with 2 M2 screws and nuts. I'll get tweezers. Yeah, it's a little bit fiddly. Let's get this started. Here we go. And there's the cab fitted to the foot plate. It's relatively easy. So what you can do now is you can go around and solder various bits. So this drag box, which is cosmetic, is not soldered up. So what we'll do is we won't do it at the moment because we've got to do the full plate. So we'll do the full plate next. A full plate is quite a large etch part. This is the full plate here. So we'll cut that out. So that's the full plate. The full plate needs to go in here between the between these parts. So we'll just use the hold and fold on this. It's quite a thin part, so when you do it, be careful about distorting the main part. So that's okay, we'll just give it a squeeze with the pliers. That's fine. So there's the full plate with the two tabs bent down, and just offer it up. And there's a bit of a gap, but doesn't matter too much. And we'll just check these holes are the correct size. They need to be 1mm. We're going to use some 1mm wire. Let's find some 1mm wire. Get the micrometer. Yeah, that's 1mm. See if it fits. Probably won't. No. Oh yeah. Right, need a couple of lengths of this, short lengths. Okay, so the wire fits the full plate, which I've just dropped. Fits it okay. We'll just check it fits the pivots, and the bits that I cut are a bit too long. Yeah, and of course they don't fit, and I've already bent them. Okay, never mind. So we'll just straighten them out. We'll just straighten them out. There's a bit of a bodge, I'm afraid. So let's get a 1mm drill. Yeah, and of course it fits now. So they're the lugs underneath that we've got to do. And just quickly, before we start soldering wire and that, we'll just run a little bit of solder to strengthen those parts. Oh, you can do this one of two ways. You can solder the wire to the full plate, or you can solder the wire to the lugs under the foot plate. I think that I will solder the wire to the full plate. There's quite a gap between the two, so we'll just feed this through. We'll get one side done. There's one side done. Well, you're going to need to be quite steady when you do this, because you need to keep the rod parallel . Okay, so there's the full plate done. And if you can see underneath, I've soldered it to the full plate rather than to the foot plate. And now we've done that, we can think about doing these other bits that to strengthen it. So we'll solder around the cosmetic drag box. So I've soldered under there, and then we'll do a bit here because we can strengthen this now. When you do it, where the join between the footplate and the cab is, we don't want any huge gaps, so you need to squeeze it up as so that there's no gaps. And then we'll just put a bit of solder along. we'll just try with our ruler again. So this is what you're aiming for, no gap, and the other side's fine too. So we can just offer the firebox up just to see what it will look like. And there should be no gap. And there isn't. Right, so what we can do now is we can think about bending the tops of the cab over. So if you just excuse me a minute, I've just got to get a bit of, I've got a bit of rod somewhere. There we are. So I've got a bit of rod ready. Oh. And this is 3mm rod. And because you've annealed the cab side, it's gone over very nicely. So I'll just do that one again, do this side again. Just put the rod on the inside and just gently fold the top of the cab over against the rod. And then we can solder inside the cab, the rear profile. So we'll just do that quickly as well. And of course, while you're doing this, you're checking it all by eye to make sure that it's all still parallel, perpendicular where it should be. There's no sort of bends where there shouldn't be. And there we are. So I've just got to get a few more bits out for the next bit, and we'll carry on in a moment. Okay, so I've been and done a little bit of preparation work for the next step, and I've done the hole in the firebox. Now I've got a set. Well, I've got sets of these progressive drills. They're in 0.1mm steps. Now they're not really any good. They're no good for drilling brass because they're predominantly designed for plastic and for doing PCBs, but they do work okay on white metal. So that hole was drilled 1.6 like I showed you earlier. Then I've used the 1.7 followed by the 1.8 to open it out, and then I've got an M2 tack where the point has broken off. So there's an M2 tap complete, and I've used that to tap that M2, so that's ready to accept a screw. The foot plate, I've drilled all the holes out that I mentioned for rivets, so we'll solder those in a minute. And I've also cleaned up and drilled these holes. These holes were blind. The middle hole of the 3 in the saddle actually holds the smoke box into the saddle, and the 2 either side, they need to be tapped, drilled and tapped M2. I used the same method that I used on this, so I drilled 1.6, then used 1.7, 1.8, and then tapped using the blunt ended M2 tap. As you can see, it goes in quite well. And this is the foot, this basically holds the chassis to the foot plate. So I'll do a couple of these first and show you. I won't show you all of them, and then I'll clean it up, clean the ends off the rivets, and then we'll fix the foot plate in place and see what it looks like. Okay, so I'll just go away and do that. I'll show you a couple maybe, and then we'll take it from there. All right, welcome back. Rather than me showing you, I've just gone and done it. So I've fitted the rivets for the top of the foot plate. I've cleaned up this a little bit more. I've finished cleaning the boiler up. I've drilled a 2.2mm hole in the bottom of it, and now what we'll do is we'll put it all together and see what it looks like. We'll call it a day at that, because the camera battery is about to run out, so we'll see how far we get. If it goes blank suddenly, you know what it is. So it's an M2 screw through the back of the cab into the firebox. And there's a slot so you can move the firebox up and down to get it level. And the boiler, I've cleaned the boiler up, so we'll fit this bit first. The white metal, where did I put it? There it is. So we'll fit that bit first. Let's make sure we get it the right way up. doesn't quite fit properly, so soften it up again without screwing it up. Right. That's better. And then the boiler sits on there, and it should sit on the cradle nicely. It does. Let's just find the correct screw. 16. Oh, all gone horribly wrong. 16mm. You want to be very careful when you do this, because any wrong move and you can distort the foot plate. You want the foot plate to stay level. Yes.
Oh, put the chicken. Shall I boil it for them?
I'm recording, Christina.
Oh, okay. I'll wait till you finish then.
Domestic duties. Yeah, it's a little bit fiddly. Yeah. And there's the rough locomotive. A little bit more fettling to do. It needs to sit down a bit at the front. We can probably do that with if we do a bit of white metal under solder. There's quite a few bits which have got to be fitted on the top of this and go through, and that will help hold it down. So there's our rough locomotive. If you can see what I mean, it's not, the boiler and the firebox are not fitted together, so it'll bend a bit. So there's the rough outline of the body. So what we've done shaped the cab, we've cleaned up the foot plate, we've done the drag beam, we've fitted the full plate, we've cleaned the boiler up, we've tapped the firebox, we've tapped the footplate front for the chassis to go into, and that's it for this time. Thank you for watching and see you again soon.